The night Jenna Hartley returned to the Lakehouse, the air felt wrong in a way she couldn't explain. A faint light flickered through the back window, though she remembered turning everything off before leaving. The door creaked open with a slow sigh, as if someone had entered only moments before she arrived. A mug of coffee sat on the counter, steam fatting, its presence impossible to justify in the empty house. Her pulse hammered as she stepped through the living room, sensing an intrusion she couldn't yet name. This place was meant to be her refuge, a quiet shore to rebuild her life after the divorce shattered it. But tonight the home felt occupied by an unseen presence, unsettling and deliberate in its silence. Jenna didn't know it yet, but the first shadow of Harold Benton had already crossed her threshold. Harold Benton first appeared at the Lakehouse on a quiet Saturday morning when Jenna was trimming the garden. He claimed he was in the area and thought he should stop by to help with small repairs around the porch. Jenna felt uneasy, but her mother insisted he was only trying to be supportive as the new part of their family. Harold walked through the rooms with slow, surveying eyes, as if assessing the structure rather than admiring it. He asked questions about ownership, mortgage history, and renovation costs that felt too pointed to ignore. A week later, Jenna returned from work to find his jacket hanging on the coat rack without any explanation. Harold said he must have left it last time, though she remembered him leaving with empty hands. Soon after, he started bringing groceries and storing them in the pantry, as if the space already belonged to him. He left energy drink cans on the coffee table and muddy footprints across the hallway carpet without apology. His toothbrush appeared in the bathroom cup beside hers, placed there with a boldness that dismissed boundaries. Jenna asked her mother why he kept showing up without calling, but Marilyn brushed it off with a smile. She said Harold simply enjoyed being helpful, and that Jenna should try to open her heart a little more. Harold then began staying over on weekends, claiming the drive back to town was too tiring for a man his age. Jenna woke one night to footsteps in the kitchen and realized Harold was raiding the fridge at 2 a.m. He apologized lightly, but continued the habit as if the house operated on his schedule, not hers. By the third weekend, his duffel bag was permanently stationed in the guest room, half unpacked and overflowing. He explained that it was easier to keep a few things at the house since he visited so often to help. Jenna sensed the shift in tone each time he spoke, a quiet assumption that she would accept whatever he did. He started commenting on her decor choices, suggesting new furniture and criticizing the inefficient layout. He even asked for a copy of the house key, pretending it was for emergencies, though she never agreed. One afternoon, Jenna found him on the back deck replacing planks without consulting her about cost or need. He said he took initiative, but the boards didn't match, and his presence felt more invasive than useful. The worst moment came when she returned from grocery shopping and caught Harold unlocking the front door. He turned the key smoothly, as if he had done it many times before, and greeted her with forced cheer. Jenna froze, realizing he must have taken a spare key from the old lockbox without permission. When she confronted him, Harold laughed and claimed he assumed it was fine since family shared everything. Marilyn defended him again, insisting Jenna was overreacting and letting stress from work cloud her judgment. Jenna felt the ground beneath her life shift, slow but unmistakable, like soil eroding under steady rain. Every boundary she tried to reinforce dissolved in Harold's careless confidence and Marilyn's blind trust. The Lakehouse was still hers on paper, but every day it felt a little less like a place she belonged to. Marilyn asked Jenna if the Lakehouse could host the wedding, speaking with a softness that disguised pressure. She said the venue would save money and create a meaningful memory for their newly formed family. Jenna hesitated, but guilt pushed her into agreement, hoping it would bring peace rather than conflict. The moment Harold heard the news, he took control of the planning with an enthusiasm that felt invasive. He walked through the house with a clipboard, noting changes he wanted for the ceremony without permission. He suggested moving furniture, repainting walls and trimming trees to open space for guests on the lawn. Jenna pointed out that most ideas were unnecessary, but he dismissed her concerns with a patronizing grin. Marilyn followed his lead, echoing his suggestions as if they were harmless improvements for the event. Days later, Harold arrived with his son Evan, who studied the house like a professional evaluator on the job. He examined the foundation, walked the property line, and asked subtle questions about the deed. Jenna watched him calculate numbers on his phone, sensing motives that had nothing to do with weddings. When she confronted Marilyn about Evan's behavior, her mother insisted he was only curious about renovations. The explanation rang false, but arguing seemed futile against Marilyn's blind confidence in her new husband. As the wedding approached, Harold began visiting alone under the excuse of preparing the property. He rearranged furniture, moved personal items, and opened sealed boxes that Jenna stored for years. She returned one afternoon to find family heirlooms displaced and her grandmother's quilt folded incorrectly. Harold claimed he wanted guests to feel the warmth of history, but his tone carried ownership, not respect. He started referencing the house as our place during planning conversations, as if Jenna were the guest. Marilyn gently reinforced the phrasing, creating a united front that left Jenna feeling outnumbered. On the wedding day, Harold's relatives filled the rooms, opening drawers and exploring hallways freely. Evan stood on the deck calculating potential rental income, speaking quietly with Harold in tense murmurs. Jenna overheard them discussing upgrades that would increase long-term value, words that chilled her. During the reception, Marilyn thanked both sides of the family for coming to their new shared home. Her mother's slip struck Jenna deeper than she expected, a quiet betrayal masked by celebration. After the guests left, Harold lingered, walking through the living room with a proprietary calm. He complimented how well the house handled the event, calling it the perfect family asset. Jenna corrected him, reminding him gently that the house belonged solely to her, not the marriage. He smiled thinly, replying that families evolve and property often follows where unity forms. The sentence unsettled her, delivered with certainty that didn't match his status as an outsider. Over the next week, Harold continued arriving unannounced, claiming to be cleaning after the ceremony. He touched every corner of the house, inspecting, adjusting, and inserting himself into routines. Jenna noticed he no longer asked before entering rooms or handling her belongings. He behaved like someone waiting for a door to open that had already opened in his mind. By the time she realized it, Harold had crossed an invisible line and settled himself permanently into her life. Harold began acting openly as if the Lakehouse belonged to him, not Jenna. He installed a massive TV in the living room without asking or discussing costs. Furniture was rearranged at his discretion, and boxes of Jenna's belongings were moved aside. He converted one of the guest rooms into a home office, claiming it would improve efficiency. His files and papers covered the desk, while Jenna's personal items were shoved into corners. Bills began to spike as Harold and his family used utilities constantly, ignoring Jenna's protests. She reminded him that the house was hers, that the electricity and water were her responsibility. Harold shrugged and said sharing was part of being family, dismissing her concerns entirely. He started controlling internet access, changing the Wi-Fi password, cutting off Jenna at random times. When she questioned it, he claimed the network belonged to the household, not just her. Jenna's frustration grew as he left muddy shoes on carpets and cups with fingerprints on every surface. He insisted he was helping keep the home alive and active, but it felt more like domination. Marilyn sided with him repeatedly, telling Jenna she needed to loosen up and stop being possessive. Jenna tried to enforce boundaries, placing her belongings in locked cabinets and drawers. Harold ignored them, opening cabinets, rifling through papers, and leaving a mess in her wake. He rearranged photos on walls, replacing family pictures with generic landscapes he preferred. Jenna confronted him calmly, asking him to respect her home, but he laughed it off. He accused her of selfishness, claiming she refused to integrate the family into her life. Marilyn echoed his words, accusing Jenna of isolating herself and rejecting familial love. Harold began taking longer showers, leaving the water running, ignoring the strain on resources. He also started using the guest rooms for his hobbies, without consulting Jenna. She discovered his personal tools scattered through her kitchen and living room, claiming convenience. Even when she tried to schedule time to enjoy the house alone, Harold interrupted with unannounced visits. He would arrive for breakfast, lunch, or dinner, expecting her to accommodate his presence. Harold began inviting friends over, leaving them to wander freely through rooms Jenna considered private. He once borrowed her car without asking, saying he only needed it for a quick trip to the store. Jenna kept detailed notes, photographing displaced items and documenting his violations. She noticed subtle manipulation, Harold framing her as unreasonable to anyone who listened. When she complained to Marilyn, her mother became defensive, implying Jenna was overreacting. The tension escalated until Jenna realized Harold no longer treated the house as a guest might. He acted like a true owner, dismissing her authority entirely and eroding her control over her home. Every attempt to assert herself triggered conflict, while Harold and Marilyn portrayed her as the villain. Jenna felt trapped in her own home, a space meant for healing turned into a battleground. The lines of possession and respect blurred completely, leaving her isolated in the place she loved most. By now, Harold's intrusion was blatant, aggressive, and unrelenting, leaving Jenna with no choice but to fight back. Jenna decided she could no longer tolerate Harold's intrusion and began planning a response. She replaced every lock on all doors, carefully securing the house from uninvited entry. Boxes of Harold's belongings were moved outside, neatly stacked and photographed for evidence. She documented every detail, capturing timestamps and images to record his violations clearly. Harold arrived unexpectedly one afternoon, carrying a bag and looking confident as ever. He knocked on the door and called her name, expecting her to let him inside without question. When Jenna refused, he slammed his hand against the door, rattling the frame violently. He tried turning the doorknob repeatedly, muttering threats and complaints under his breath. Jenna stayed calm, stepping back to maintain distance while dialing 911 immediately. She explained the situation to the dispatcher, emphasizing past intrusions and her ownership. Within minutes, police arrived, their presence tense but reassuring as they assessed the scene. Officers confirmed that the Lakehouse legally belonged to Jenna, citing the deed and tax records. They warned Harold not to return under threat of arrest for trespassing and harassment. Harold left the property reluctantly, shooting Jenna cold glares before walking to his car. Despite the warning, he later hired a lawyer known for filing aggressive, questionable claims. The attorney sent Jenna legal notices alleging unjust enrichment and implied contracts. Harold and his lawyer argued he had contributed to the house improvements and deserved access. Jenna reviewed the documents carefully, realizing the claims were baseless and manipulative. She gathered her evidence, compiling photos, videos, and a detailed log of every incident. Marilyn, influenced by Harold's persuasion, began expressing disappointment in Jenna. She accused Jenna of overreacting, refusing to share her home, and creating unnecessary conflict. Jenna felt betrayed, but remained determined to protect her property and maintain boundaries. She consulted a reputable lawyer who confirmed that her ownership was fully protected. The attorney drafted a formal response, countering Harold's false claims with her evidence. Jenna's documentation included photos of displaced items, timestamps of unauthorized visits, and receipts. She also recorded messages from Harold that demonstrated his disregard for her consent. Through careful legal preparation, She built a strong case that Harold had no rights to the property. Jenna's actions sent a clear message. She would not tolerate intrusion, manipulation, or threats. Each time Harold tried to argue or intimidate, she relied on evidence rather than emotion. The process was exhausting, but Jenna remained steadfast, determined to reclaim her home fully. Neighbors began noticing her vigilance, offering support and validating her concerns privately. Jenna installed additional security cameras to monitor the property continuously. She also secured sensitive documents, ensuring Harold could not access financial or personal records. Every measure reinforced the fact that the Lakehouse belonged solely to her and no one else. By the end of this stage, Jenna had successfully established control over the house again. Harold was legally warned, documented, and partially deterred, though the struggle was far from over. Jenna felt a sense of relief, but new vigilance was necessary to protect herself from future violations. Her home was once again a safe space, and she had taken concrete steps to defend it decisively. Harold's anger escalated after Jenna secured her home and involved the police. He confronted her in the parking lot one morning, his hands gripping her arm violently. Jenna struggled free, feeling sharp bruises form along her forearm and wrist. She immediately called the police, reporting an assault and requesting an emergency protective order. The responding officers documented her injuries and filed a report detailing Harold's aggression. Jenna filed for a temporary restraining order, listing both past intrusions and recent violence. During the hearing, Harold acted calm, claiming he was the victim and Jenna was provoking him. His lawyer attempted to paint Jenna as unreasonable, exaggerating her complaints and frustrations. Jenna's attorney presented extensive evidence, including photos, timestamps, and security footage. The footage showed Harold entering the house uninvited and moving her belongings without permission. Text messages and emails were submitted, highlighting repeated threats and manipulative behavior. Jenna testified about the assault in the parking lot, providing medical documentation of her bruises. Evidence also revealed Harold's past marriages, where he had similarly exploited partners with assets. His lawyer tried to dismiss prior incidents, but records and public documents confirmed the history. The judge reviewed the pattern of harassment, abuse, and property violations carefully. 2 witnesses, neighbors, testified about Harold's aggressive presence and uninvited visits. The court granted Jenna a 2-year restraining order, legally preventing Harold from approaching her. Jenna felt a mix of relief and apprehension, knowing the order protected her legally, but not emotionally. Harold's demeanor changed slightly, realizing his previous tactics were no longer sufficient. He continued to attempt contact through legal channels, but Jenna's attorney responded promptly. During this time, Jenna discovered that Harold had a record of manipulating women with property. The pattern included coercion, false legal claims, and financial exploitation in previous relationships. Jenna felt vindicated, knowing her actions were aligned with legal and moral authority. Marilyn struggled to accept the truth, torn between loyalty to Harold and the evidence before her eyes. Jenna arranged a meeting with her mother to explain the documented abuses calmly and clearly. She hoped to help Marilyn understand the manipulation and regain perspective before it was too late. Jenna maintained firm boundaries, refusing contact with Harold except through legal channels. Her attorney advised ongoing documentation of any harassment or attempted breaches of the restraining order. Neighbors continued to provide informal support, observing Harold's behavior and reporting suspicious actions. Jenna also attended counseling to process trauma from the physical and emotional assaults. She journaled daily, noting triggers, emotional responses, and the gradual restoration of her sense of safety. The Lakehouse began to feel like a true refuge again, as Harold's immediate threat was legally contained. Despite relief, Jenna remained vigilant, knowing Harold's history suggested potential future escalation. She strengthened security systems and ensured all personal and financial records were inaccessible to him. By the end of this stage, Jenna had established legal protection, emotional clarity, and strategic defenses. She felt stronger, empowered, and prepared for whatever steps Harold might take next. Her home was her sanctuary once more, and the battle to protect it had been partially won. Harold ignored the restraining order and returned to the Lakehouse under the cover of night. He climbed over the back fence, trying to avoid security cameras he assumed were inactive. Jenna, alerted by motion sensors, immediately called 911, reporting a trespass and violation. Police arrived within minutes, catching Harold inside the property and taking him into custody. He was handcuffed and read his rights, showing no resistance but smirking at the situation. Detectives began investigating Harold's background more thoroughly after this blatant violation. They discovered a long history of fraud, particularly targeting older women with valuable assets. Harold had operated across multiple states, using marriage and relationships to access property. Records revealed financial schemes, forged documents, and falsified contracts to secure wealth. Authorities confirmed he had deceived at least a dozen women over a 20-year period. Harold was charged with federal offenses, including interstate fraud and property exploitation. Jenna learned that her mother, Marilyn, had unwittingly spent all her savings defending Harold. The money included retirement funds and even part of her late husband's estate. Marilyn faced bankruptcy, realizing too late the extent of Harold's deception and manipulation. Jenna felt conflicted, mourning the loss of her mother's security, but relieved her home remained safe. Harold was formally indicted, facing serious prison time for his coordinated, interstate schemes. Law enforcement worked with federal prosecutors to ensure his activities were fully documented. Jenna provided statements and evidence to support the investigation into his criminal network. Authorities discovered shell companies and offshore accounts used to launder money and hide assets. Harold's prior marriages were scrutinized, revealing a consistent pattern of targeting women with wealth. Marilyn, overwhelmed by guilt and financial ruin, began attending therapy to process her mistakes. Jenna remained her mother's anchor, offering guidance and insisting on boundaries during recovery. The family dynamic shifted dramatically, with trust broken but slowly beginning to rebuild. Harold's arrest was a turning point, marking the start of a lengthy legal process to hold him accountable. Federal investigators warned that he might attempt to manipulate witnesses or flee the country. Jenna reinforced her home security and continued documenting any suspicious activity near the property. The police recommended she maintain a low profile until the trial concluded for safety reasons. Marilyn admitted she had been deceived and expressed deep remorse for defending Harold. Jenna listened patiently, setting firm conditions for reconciliation while protecting her own boundaries. Harold's trial attracted media attention due to the interstate fraud and pattern of predatory behavior. Evidence from multiple victims painted a comprehensive picture of his manipulative schemes. Jenna attended hearings when necessary, providing first-hand accounts of harassment and trespass. The federal case moved slowly but steadily, ensuring that Harold faced full accountability. Marilyn began rebuilding her life from scratch, guided by Jenna's cautious but supportive presence. The Lakehouse remained Jenna's sanctuary, fully under her control and free from Harold's intrusion. Though the family had suffered financial and emotional loss, the legal victory offered a sense of closure. Jenna remained vigilant, knowing Harold's network of crimes was extensive but finally exposed. By the end of the stage, Harold faced federal prosecution, and Jenna had regained safety and clarity. Her home, her legacy, and her peace of mind were restored, though the scars of betrayal remained. Harold was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison, ending his immediate threat to Jenna. Marilyn collapsed under the weight of her mistakes and financial ruin, finally seeing the truth. She admitted she had been deceived and expressed deep remorse for supporting Harold blindly. Jenna listened, holding back anger, determined to rebuild their fragile mother-daughter bond. They agreed on clear boundaries, including therapy and financial accountability, before reconciliation. Marilyn began attending counseling to process guilt and learn how to make healthier choices. Jenna offered guidance, but insisted on protecting her home and emotional well-being. They met regularly, sharing honest conversations about past mistakes and future intentions. The Lakehouse returned to its role as a sanctuary, free from intrusion and manipulation. Jenna reclaimed her routines, decorating, cooking, and enjoying quiet evenings without fear. Marilyn gradually learned to respect boundaries and recognize predatory behavior in others. Together, they worked on restoring trust while acknowledging the losses they endured. The family began healing slowly, with honesty and transparency forming the foundation. Though scars remained, hope grew as mother and daughter rebuilt their relationship carefully. Jenna finally felt peace, knowing her home, her life, and her family were safe and her own.